darkness. Only the faint flicker of a lamp and the sound of a pen scratching on paper. On the table lie equations that will change the world. But the man who wrote them suddenly stops. His hand trembles. He looks at the formulas, and for the first time in his entire life understands. He didn't create them. He merely found them. "Who wrote this before me?" he whispers into the empty room. Thus ends the 50-year journey of James Clerk Maxwell, a man who sought answers in science and found God. He wasn't always a non-believer. Once, as a small boy, he sat on his mother's lap while she read him the Bible. "Mother, is this true?" he would ask. She would smile, "Yes, my son. This is the greatest truth." But when he was 8, his mother died of cancer. Slowly, painfully, irreversibly. Little James stood by her bed, clutching her cold hand. "Lord," his father prayed through tears, "receive her soul." But the boy was silent, and something in his heart broke. After the funeral, he stopped praying. He took his mother's Bible, placed it on a shelf, and never opened it again. If God existed, he told his father, Mother wouldn't have died. His father didn't argue. He only quietly replied, "Someday you'll understand, son." But James didn't want to understand. He wanted to know. At 16, he was already at university. Thin, shy, with perpetually disheveled hair. His classmates laughed. Maxwell's lost in his formulas again. And he truly was there in a world where everything could be calculated, measured, proven. Once a professor asked him, "Maxwell, are you a religious man?" The young man answered coldly, "I believe in what I can prove." "And can you prove God?" "No. Therefore, I don't believe in him." The professor shook his head. "You're still young. Life will teach you." But James didn't listen. He had a better teacher science. It didn't deceive, didn't lie, didn't take mothers from 8-year-old boys. He plunged into research headfirst. Geometry, physics, optics. Each science opened new horizons. He could sit for hours over a single equation, seeking an elegant solution. In these symbols and numbers was order, logic, justice. Unlike real life, where good people die young and prayers go unanswered. One evening, as he worked in the library, a classmate approached him, the local priest's son. "Maxwell," he said, "Father invites you to Sunday service. He says a young mind needs spiritual guidance." James didn't look up from his book. "Tell your father that my guide is reason. It doesn't fail." "And the soul? Can reason explain the soul?" "The soul doesn't exist. There's only the brain, nerves, electrical impulses. Everything can be explained." The boy shook his head and left. Maxwell returned to his formulas. But somehow that evening they wouldn't come together. Something was interfering. An unpleasant feeling, as if he'd offended someone. He dismissed the thought. Science knows no offense, only facts. Years passed. He became a professor, inventor, one of the greatest minds of his generation. His lectures drew hundreds of listeners. His articles were published in the finest journals. He married Catherine, a kind, quiet woman who loved him despite his coldness toward the church. She would ask, "James, come to service with me." He would answer, "Sorry, dear, I have work." Work, always work. Electricity, magnetism, light. He wanted to understand how the world worked, not why, but how. Causes didn't interest him, only the mechanism. One evening, a student came to him. The boy was upset. "Professor, I was just at church, and the priest said that Science is a sin because we're trying to understand what belongs only to God, Maxwell answered sharply. If God doesn't want us to understand the world, why did he give us reason? No, young man. Either God doesn't exist at all, or he's not what the priests say. The student left quietly, and Maxwell returned to his equations. But something began to change. It happened slowly, imperceptibly, like dawn creeping up on night. He was working on unifying electricity and magnetism. Years of work, thousands of calculations. At first it seemed these two forces had nothing in common. Electricity current in wires, sparks, lightning. Magnetism, a mysterious force that attracts metal. Two different things. But the deeper he delved, the more connections he saw. One day, after another sleepless night, he derived an equation that showed a changing electric field generates a magnetic one, and a changing magnetic field generates an electric one. They dance with each other, intertwine, give birth to one another. He looked at the formula and felt goosebumps run down his spine. It was beautiful, too beautiful to be chance. Curious, he muttered to himself. Why did nature choose precisely these proportions? The question seemed simple, but it lodged in his head like a splinter. The following months he worked like a man possessed. Catherine worried. James, you're not eating, not sleeping. Stop for at least a day. But he couldn't. He felt just a little more, and everything would fall into place. And then, one evening, in 1864, he derived the final equation, the one that explained the nature of light. He looked at the paper and was seized with terror. The formulas formed a perfect symmetry. 4 equations. Simple, elegant, all-encompassing. They described how electric and magnetic fields generate each other and spread through space as waves. And the speed of these waves. He quickly checked the calculations. The speed equaled the speed of light. My God! Escaped from him. He froze. How many years had passed since he last spoke that word? Light is not something separate. It's an electromagnetic wave. Electricity, magnetism, and light all one. 3 manifestations of a single force. He looked at the formulas again. They were too precise, too harmonious, too intentional. This cannot be chance, he whispered. He took a ruler, checked the calculations. Everything correct. He checked again, and again, and again. And the formulas lay before him like a poem written by an unknown poet. He rose, approached the window. It was evening outside. The first stars appeared in the sky. Their light had traveled millions of years to reach his eyes. And now he knew this light doesn't simply exist. It obeys laws. Laws he had just written down. But who wrote these laws before him? Who? He asked the empty room aloud. That night he didn't sleep. He sat by the window, looked at the stars, and thought. He had dedicated his life to science to prove the world is a mechanism, cold, precise, indifferent. But instead he found harmony, beauty, order that cannot be explained by chance alone. Electricity and magnetism combined perfectly. Light emerged as a dance of 2 forces. Everything was interconnected, precise, refined. This is not a mechanism, he suddenly understood. This is music, a symphony. And if it's music, someone composed it. He remembered the old professor's words, "Life will teach you." Back then, young and self-assured, he hadn't listened. But now, at 43, he began to understand. Science hadn't proven the absence of God. On the contrary, it showed his presence. in every formula, in every law, in every constant. The universe is not chaos. It is creation. The next morning he came downstairs. Catherine was making breakfast. "Dear," he said quietly, "where is that Bible that belonged to my mother?" She looked at him in surprise. "In the attic? In the old chest? Why do you ask?" He didn't answer. He went upstairs, found the worn book, opened the first page. "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." His eyes filled with tears. Light. He had studied light for 50 years, and only now understood. He hadn't discovered it. He had merely read the recipe, written by someone else. He returned downstairs with the Bible in his hands. Catherine sat at the table, looking at him with wide eyes. "James, what happened?" He sat across from her, placed the book on the table. "I was a fool," he said quietly. 35 years I searched for truth in formulas, and thought that if I found answers, I would prove God doesn't exist. But instead, I proved the opposite." "What do you mean?" "Light, Catherine. I derived the equations of light, and they're so perfect, so precise, they cannot be chance. Someone conceived them. Someone created the laws by which everything works. And I can no longer ignore this." She took his hand. "You're returning to him?" "I don't know if he'll accept me after so many years of neglect, but I want to try." That evening, for the first time in 35 years, James' clerk, Maxwell, knelt and prayed. He didn't become a fanatic, didn't start preaching in the streets. He simply returned to faith quietly, as one returns home after a long journey. He began attending church with Catherine again, prayed before sleep, read scripture. But most of all, he changed his approach to science. Now each discovery was a prayer for him, each formula a hymn to the Creator. He didn't stop being a scientist. He became a scientist who sees God in his work. Once a student asked him, "Professor, is it true that you believe in God again?" Maxwell smiled. "I never stopped believing in truth. I simply now understand that truth is greater than I thought." "But you said you only believe in what can be proven." "Yes, and I proved it. I proved that the universe has design, and if there's design, there's a designer. Look at my equations. They describe light, something we see every day. But they also show that light obeys mathematical laws. Perfect laws. Who established these laws? Chance? No, chance doesn't create order. Only mind creates order." The boy pondered. "So science led you to God?" Maxwell shook his head. "No, God led me to science. I was just too proud to admit it." Another student standing nearby interjected, "But Professor, many scientists don't believe in God. How can you be certain?" Maxwell paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts. "You know," he said, "imagine you found a watch in the forest. It works perfectly, every gear in its place, every spring precisely calibrated. Would you hold it up and say, 'What a wonderful accident. Metal assembled itself into a watch?' No, you'd say, 'Someone made it.' The same with the universe. It's far more complex than any watch, and I can no longer believe it arose by itself." The students were silent, and Maxwell continued, "I'm not saying all scientists must believe. Everyone seeks in their own way. But for me, after so many years of research, the only logical explanation for the existence of such perfect laws of nature is a mind that created them." In his final years, he often sat by the window and watched light glide across the walls. Rays danced, refracted through a prism, painted rainbows on white walls. "Look, Catherine," he would tell his wife, Light still amazes me. After so many years of study, I still see wonder in it. The pain in his stomach grew stronger and stronger. Doctors couldn't help. Cancer the same that took his mother. Catherine wept. James, it's unfair. You've done so much for the world. He smiled. I did what I was meant to do. God gave me life and I lived it. Gave me reason and I used it. Gave me light and I studied it. And now he calls me home and I go. Aren't you afraid? No. I was afraid for 40 years that death is the end. And now I know. It's only a transition, from light into light. He died quietly, in prayer, with his mother's Bible by his bed. But before death he wrote a final letter to the student who once asked him about God. Dear friend, you asked me whether science can lead to God. I answer, yes, but it's not science one must seek but truth. Science is only one of the paths. I lived half my life believing that reason can explain everything. And I was wrong. Reason can only show that there is something greater than itself. The formulas I derived are not mine. I merely wrote them down. They existed before me, and will exist after me. Someone created them, and the same one created me to find them. Now I go to him, and the only thing I regret that I didn't come sooner. Don't repeat my mistake. Don't waste life searching for proofs. Simply look around. Proofs are everywhere. In every ray of light, in every star in the sky, in every heartbeat, in every child's smile, in every law of nature. God doesn't hide. We close our eyes. I closed mine for 40 years and lost so much time. But he accepted me even after this, because he's not like us. He's more merciful. Yours in Christ, James Clerk Maxwell. His light didn't fade. It remained in every ray, in every pulse, in every electrical signal. But the most important light he kindled was not in the laboratory. He kindled it in the hearts of those who read his letter, those who understood. Science and faith are not enemies. They complement each other. Because true science doesn't lead away from God. It leads to Him. And when we look at the stars, we see not only light, we see the signature of the Creator. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth His handiwork. Psalm 19, verse 1.